Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our webinar that we're holding today, introducing Always On VPN Dynamic Profile Configurator, or DPC. In this session, I want to share a couple of things with you about this great new open source tool, and not new, but we're just kind of trying to bang the drum, make a little bit more noise about it, because we think that it can be really beneficial. There's a lot of folks out there who may not be aware of this. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Hicks. I'm the founder and principal consultant at Richard M. Hicks Consulting. And today I have with me my good friend, Leo D'Arcy. Leo, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hi there. I'm the kind of creator of DPC. Started it crazy about 5 years ago now with an organisation called Power on Platforms. They've since unfortunately gone under, but I was able to kind of take the code, make it open source, and make it available to everyone. So I've been a consultant in Microsoft technologies for over a decade now, and I now kind of sit as a cloud solution architect with a critical issues advisory firm.
Fantastic. Right on. Thank you, Leo, for all the work that you do for DPC, and thanks for joining me here today. I appreciate it tremendously. Before we get on to talk about DPC, let's talk about some of the challenges and issues that DPC addresses. So first of all, Always On VPN was designed from the beginning as a solution that was going to be managed using Intune. It was designed for modern management. If you came from direct access, you were familiar with the remote access management console, which ultimately just made changes to group policy objects. And that was the management model or the implementation model in those classic products. But moving to Always On VPN, Microsoft wanted to use a more modern management approach. So they chose to implement these settings using MDM, and specifically the CSP, or Configuration Service Provider. So this was an MDM solution, or MDM managed solution from the beginning. So Intune was really the tool of choice to deploy and manage Always On VPN client configuration settings. The challenge there, of course, is that in the beginning, in the early days, there wasn't a native Intune policy. They have since added it, and they've been growing it and adding features to it, but it doesn't offer access to the complete feature set of capabilities that Always On VPN adds. So for example, if you create a native Intune VPN profile for Always On VPN, you do not have the ability to disable the class-based default route. That is a super critical setting. You can't change, or you can't define interface metrics or route metrics, which are crucial for ensuring proper name resolution and also ensuring optimal traffic steering. There's only limited support for IPv6 in the native Intune policy. For example, and this is just a total crack up, you can add IPv6 routes, but you can't add anything longer than a /32 or a 32-bit mask. If you work with IPv6 at all, you know the default prefix is /64. So a 32 would be a giant network. So that's kind of foolish. You don't have access to disable the disconnect button or access to the advanced options. You have those options in XML, but you don't have those in the native Intune profile. You can't, by the way, you can't disable or adjust any of the IKE mobility settings, which is crucial for device tunnel, user tunnel with IKE v2 when you have a load balance configuration. So if your servers are behind a load balancer, those settings are really critical, not exposed in the Intune profile. So the solution today is to use a custom XML file. So we build our own XML configuration file, and it gives us access to the entire feature set of Always On VPN settings, and that's fantastic. The problem is that XML brings its own set of challenges. Now I have to create this configuration file. I have to manage that, version it, maintain it in probably a source code repository. If you're doing this today, you probably have versioned text files in a file share or something, but you have multiple versions of this that you have to maintain. By the way, you might have multiple nuanced different settings for different profiles, like different target audiences, right? And then, of course, you have to manage the versions among those, and it can be really challenging. Also, understanding all of the settings in the CSP, which is basically where all of the capabilities of Always On VPN come from. They're all defined in the CSP. Making heads or tails of that document, really understanding how to implement those settings is really challenging. A lot of that is trial and error, and it's really cumbersome. At the end of the day, managing configuration files in text format is very tedious, very time consuming, very error prone. Making things worse is that, okay, so we have access to all these cool settings. Windows 11 came along and Microsoft decided that they were going to do things a little bit differently. And they decided to start checking the VPN configuration when you were using custom XML to make sure that your XML that you submitted to Intune matches exactly what is on the client. The problem is that when you do this, the client actually, when you ingest those XML settings, when they're pushed out by MDM, will make some minor adjustments to the settings while they're input, right? So what it does is Intune looks at the output of that, sees that it's different than your input because there wasn't a semicolon in this one spot, or you had an element out of order. Worked fine in Windows 10, but in Windows 11, Intune thinks that something changed, so it forces a resync, or on resync, it forces a new VPN profile to be deployed. That introduces disconnect. So you have a customer, you have a client who's connected, they're RDP'd into a server, maybe are SSH'd into a router switch, they're doing something, and then all of a sudden, boom, their connection drops. Well, it was a device sync, and the device sync erroneously said, oh, there was a change when there wasn't one, and then boom. So now you have this problem. And of course, the fix for that is to make sure that your XML configuration file is perfectly configured exactly the way Intune expects it. That can be challenging in and of itself. One. Two, it's not a stable or durable solution because things could change in the future. We could be right back in this scenario. So it's not a great spot to be in. The real challenge here also, I think one of the biggest ones, is that even when using custom XML, we talked about the limitations of native Intune VPN profile. Custom XML is great. We have access to the full feature set, but there are still, even then, some settings that are not in XML that you might want to adjust. Things like client certificate EKU filtering. Can't do that in XML. Device tunnel status in the UI, if you want to see a visual indicator of device tunnel connectivity, that's a registry setting. It's not in XML. If you want to set MTU settings, there's a handful of settings that you would have to deploy or you would have to manage post-deployment. The biggest problem with that is that what you end up with is you end up pushing out a profile that is either at suboptimal at best or potentially broken until your remediation script runs. So post-deployment configurations are always a challenge because there's a gap. There's a time window between when the profile is deployed and when the remediation actually takes place. And by the way, the remediation itself is not the end of the story. We can run a remediation script to set those additional settings post-deployment, but most of those settings don't take place until the VPN until the VPN connection restarts. So you have this window, you have this gap of time in which you have either a broken or suboptimal configuration, not good for productivity. It's kind of a pain to manage as well. So as I mentioned before, we have this custom XML file, but like I said, using custom XML almost causes as many problems as it solves. So you have to manage the XML configuration file itself. Like I said, not only the issuing and managing, but maintaining all of that good stuff. Many of the configuration settings, or some of the configuration settings certainly, need to be dynamically set. So if you're doing things like Office 365 exclusions or DNS from routes, and these are advanced features of DPC, and we're going to talk about them in detail shortly. But a lot of those things you might need to update. Let's say I need to update the routing table. Let's say I need to update my exclusion list. I would have to go out and edit my XML and then push that back out to everybody. And so there's a lot of challenges with that. As I mentioned before, manual configuration of these files is tedious, time-consuming, error-prone. It's not a lot of fun. And of course, the documentation is difficult. And the other thing is that when there are changes to capabilities, nobody's coming out and telling you, hey, you can do this now in CSP. You almost have to stumble upon it. I'm lucky I have friends at Microsoft. Sometimes they will tell me when new features come out, but sometimes I just have to go through the document and go, oh, that's a new setting. I've never seen that before. And, and then go from there. So it's not a fun place to be in as an administrator. A better solution is to have one that is self-documenting, uses a centralized configuration store or policy store, and has the ability to flexibly and dynamically adjust or define parameters at runtime. And so those are some of the things that DPC does for us. So what is this DPC that I'm talking about? So this is Always On VPN Dynamic Profile Configurator, or DPC. It is an open source software-based solution used for issuing and managing Always On VPN client configuration settings in your environment. It is a software solution, so there is an agent that gets installed on your endpoints. This endpoint or this software is basically reads its configuration, the settings for the VPN profiles, from a central location. It's designed to use group policy, but we're going to talk about how you may not want to use group policy. You might want to use Intune. So Always On VPN DPC was designed, as Leo had mentioned, about 5 years ago. It was really designed to address the lack or the gap of Active Directory group policy management. The beauty is that Intune allows us to do this, and we're going to talk about it here in just a bit. But DPC, basically how it works is, again, we have this central policy store. It can be our ADMX files copied to the central store in AD, so it's basically replicated out to all of our domain controllers. But you can also ingest ADMX files or upload ADMX files to Intune. That's really powerful because I can just take the custom ADMX that DPC uses, upload it to Intune, and manage the solution entirely from Intune. So once we have our endpoint, which is under Intune management, we can push out the DPC agent. And by the way, if it's just under group policy, if it's a straight AD join, then it's just domain join membership and using group policy. Regardless, the agent reads those settings, generates a VPN profile, just like Intune would, just like you would with your PowerShell commands today. And then ultimately you get VPN tunnels, which are no different than if you'd have done it for yourself, except for we just have a much more elegant way to do that. So DPC, if you're using even the most basic features, it's just going to make your life a lot easier from a management perspective. It's very easy to configure. It uses, on premises, it uses just the very familiar AD group policy management paradigm. You don't have to do XML anymore. You get out of the XML business. You don't have to fight with that. You can actually, with DPC, go far beyond not only the native Intune policy, but even what's capable in XML. So we have a lot of advanced features that we're going to talk about shortly. But ultimately, all of this means that you can deploy the Always On VPN configurations in a fully optimized posture instantly and immediately. And all of those capabilities and features are available to those users instantly. No more waiting for post-configuration scripts to run or post-deployment scripts to run. All of that good stuff. So talking about advanced features, I want to talk about a few of them. There's some really cool stuff built into DPC. Some of the ones I want to highlight are things like routing and DNS. So you have the ability to create routes from DNS resolution. We're going to talk about that more in a second. Protocol strategy. This is a crucial one because Microsoft tried to implement this and it's borked. It doesn't work. So many customers want to adjust their protocol strategy. And if you're trying to use native CSP, it doesn't work. Microsoft 365 inclusions. If you are doing forced tunneling or full tunneling, you're bringing all traffic over the VPN tunnel, all internet traffic. best practice there is to include the Microsoft 365 destinations. That is a mile-long list of IP addresses and subnets that you would have to manually define. And by the way, those change. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more in just a second. We've also included some stability improvements to help reliability and performance. So talking about routing and DNS, routes from DNS is a feature where at runtime, the client will resolve a host name and add that IP address to its routing table. The most some of the use cases are, let's say I want to do source IP anchoring. I'm doing split tunneling, but I have this one public resource that I do need to bring over the tunnel because the traffic needs to egress from on premises so that it's allowed on the target's firewall, right? So the application is allowed by my company, but it has to come from my building or my data center. And so if I'm a VPN client, I'm going to be coming from somewhere else on the internet. It doesn't work. So source IP anchoring is a feature where I basically say, hey, I'm doing split tunneling. So if it's not my internal namespace, send it to the internet, with the exception of, let's say I want to bring www.richardhicks.com over the tunnel as well. So I can literally say, okay, I can just simply add that to my routing table. I could add my IP address to the routing table. And that might work well. It might work forever. It might not. If the IP address changes, now that breaks. How am I going to figure that out? Well, my customers are going to complain that this isn't working anymore. I'm going to have to go in and adjust my XML and have to deal with that manually. It's not a great position to be in as an administrator. So routes from DNS says, I'll just basically add www.richardhicks.com as an exclusion. Now, on the client side, it will resolve dynamically www.richardhicks.com, add the IP addresses to DNS. Now, Leo, quick clarification on that. If there's more than one IP address, are they all added? How does that feature work?
Yes, so there are some caveats to this feature. Effectively, what it's doing is an NS lookup in the background. So if your website shows up as, or the website you're trying to connect to shows up as having multiple IP addresses, they all get classed as /32s and are added in, but it won't handle things like CDNs or any of that stuff, or where there is like a really rapidly changing IP address like google.com or something. That's a very, very dynamic IP address, so it almost changes on a per call basis.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of things. It's not designed to handle that kind of stuff, but more that whole, the IP address might change weekly or theoretically might change in the future because you don't have control of that and therefore you can't guarantee it, but it's more likely than not going to stay on the same one or two IPs.
Yeah, very good. No question. And by the way, this is no different than any other solution where we're going to do source IP anchoring like that. It's easy if you know the IP address, or if you know even the CIDR range. Maybe your provider, your application provider says, hey, we're always going to have IP addresses in this range, and that might work well enough. But sometimes you don't know. And this is just a great solution. Not perfect, as Leo mentioned, but it is still very, very helpful. It does allow us to have a configuration that really just kind of follows the environment in this case, right? So if things change, as the administrator, I don't have to worry about it. So there may be some disruption, but it's going to be minimal, no question. And ultimately, fewer static lists for you to maintain. And Microsoft 365 is the big one there. We're going to talk about that in a second. I do want to talk about a couple of things with protocols, exclusions, and stability. So protocol strategies, this is something I mentioned earlier. Many administrators like to use IKE v2 for the user tunnel and then fall back to SSTP if IKE v2 is not available. This is a pretty common scenario. IKE v2 is a great protocol, but it uses UDP ports 500 and 4500, which are not guaranteed to be open on every firewall. Restricted firewalls will block it. Hotels selectively block it because they don't want you using VPNs on their network for some reason. I've tested this myself. I can speak to that truthfully. But at the end of the day, there might be some reasons to do that. And as I mentioned before, Microsoft added this capability to the CSP. You can specify the order of preference for VPN protocols and some of the fallback strategy. the challenge is that it's broken. So if you implement it, I forget what it was, Leo, refresh my memory. It was like the VPN, you get VPN connection doesn't work, or the VPN connection doesn't show up. There's some really bad things that happen when you try to implement this. Do you remember what that was?
Just trying to think exactly, but one of the key problems is actually if you are trying to use custom cryptography, which is a very common request or requirement to do on the IKV2 side. If you set it up with SSTP fallback, I believe it is, then it doesn't accept the custom cryptography arguments at all. It just ignores them and they go off into the ether. So as soon as you then try and connect via IKV2, you get the policy mismatch error rather than an actual working tunnel. So the way DPC handles that is it actually always installs a tunnel as IKV2, and then it switches the protocol after it's been installed. And for whatever reason, that just works.
And that's clever for sure. And that was a huge pain point in the early days when I had to tell customers before DPC, like, no, you just can't do this. You got to pick one, and you're gonna have to stick with it, right? And by the way, Microsoft, I pushed back on Microsoft hard on that bug because I think it's a bug. But no, they insisted otherwise and weren't interested in fixing it. And so I have no pull with them, really. I'm not if I was a Fortune 5 company, maybe I could, but unfortunately, as a lowly independent consultant, I'm not getting anywhere with that. But anyway, so this is fixed. You can select the protocol strategy that you want to use in DPC, and it works flawlessly. Microsoft 365 exclusions. So if you're doing forced tunneling or full tunneling, again, as I mentioned before, the best practice is to exclude Microsoft 365. Now, how do you do that? Well, there is a whole laundry list of domains and IP addresses, and that's documented on the internet, on Microsoft's website. So what you would have to do is you'd have to go get those and then type all of those things in, right? Or if you're clever, you could write a PowerShell script that goes out and gets it from them programmatically, and then you would update your XML configuration file and push that all to your client. So the problem is those lists are dynamic. They change periodically. And by the way, they don't really announce it. They just do it. They just change things. So that's a real challenge. So with DPC is interesting in that what it does is it builds this list at runtime. So when it builds the VPN profile, correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, I think does it do this on the client itself, or is this on the administrative workstation when you're setting up the policy?
So it's all client side. So as part of the profile generation, it actually calls out to the Microsoft endpoint, grabs the list and actually caches it as well, so that if you are in an offline state when the next profile cache needs to happen, it's not necessarily the freshest, but it's still better than nothing. And that way all the clients kind of get these things individually. Great.
Yeah. So that is a lifesaver by itself. So that feature is fantastic. I have customers that were using Always On VPN prior to DPC, and this feature alone pushed a couple of them over that. We're like, yeah, we don't want to have to manage this. This is fantastic. So dynamically updating Microsoft 365 exclusions saves a great deal of pain. And as I'd mentioned before, there are some features and capabilities of DPC that can improve connection stability and reliability. For example, we kind of gracefully handle some common errors. What's the one I'm thinking of? Port not available or port already open. And correct if I'm wrong, Leo, but the when you get that error message, if you just restart the Razman service, it fixes itself. And so rather than her trying to explain to your users to do this or have to have an administrator log in and do it, the agent just does it on its own. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, it's an optional setting you can have where it effectively looks in the event logs for that error message that can occasionally happen, and it will try and do a force restart on the service.
Good deal.
If it finds it. Also, just on the exclusion side of things, because the policy, whether it's in Active Directory or in Intune or a management tool of your choice, because that's kind of a centralized location, and it can then handle configuration updates. It's also significantly easier to handle other sets of exclusions, for example, the likes of Zoom or any other kind of service that provides their own kind of exception list. And then all you have to do is kind of tie that list into the API for your management solution, rather than needing to write your own custom profile manipulation tool that then has to get packaged and deployed as well.
Good deal. Yeah. All great stuff. All great stuff. Awesome. So let's talk about, so as I mentioned before, we talked about Always On VPN DPC being created out of the need to manage it using Active Directory and group policy. But it was necessary in the early days because many folks didn't have Intune. Intune was, pretty nascent at that point. A lot of organizations weren't adopting it or hadn't adopted it yet, and so we needed to cover this gap. And so that's where DPC was born. The nice thing about it is that if you are moving to modern management using Intune, or you're already there, you're already using Intune, and you prefer to manage it here, you can still leverage DPC because DPC does allow you, or DPC does work with Intune, because Intune does allow us to upload custom ADMX files. So it's super easy. You just extract the ADMX file. You can download it from GitHub. It's actually packaged with the installer, and you just upload those files to Intune, define the settings there, and now you can push them out to your Intune managed clients. So if you're looking at DPC today and you're thinking, oh, this is great, but I don't use Active Directory, or I'm moving away from AD on-premises management for my client devices, my managed endpoints, I'm moving to Intune, DPC has you covered. Upload the ADMX files to Intune, and you're good to go. And the advantage here is that it does kind of bypass this Windows 11 bug that we talked about before. You don't have to worry about that. And again, just to drive that point home, this is a fully optimized configuration right out of the box. When that VPN tunnel establishes, every configuration setting is dialed in, tuned, and optimized for you, so that you can take advantage of it immediately without having to run remediation scripts, or further wait for the remediation scripts to run. So again, adopting Intune, super simple. Upload your ADMX files to Intune. Configure the settings in Intune. It's super simple. Assign those settings to device groups, user groups, however you want. Just ensure that they are under that management policy. And then once that's done, you can deploy the agent, and the agent will pick up those settings, deploy the VPN tunnels, and you are off to the races. So again, don't panic if you think that this is an Active Directory only solution. We have many customers that have deployed this with Intune, and they're quite happy. So, yes, you.
It's probably just worth mentioning that ultimately DPC is a registry-based tool. So while we're talking about Intune and group policy as kind of the Microsoft first-party solutions for that, if you have another tool that you're using for manipulating the registry, DPC is 100% compatible with those tools as well.
Very good. And in terms of support, that's cool. You're okay with customers just pushing out the registry settings for DPC?
Yeah, it's entirely supported. Obviously, if someone comes back and says, why isn't this profile working, the main support question would be, let's see a look of the registry on your device, or on the device in question, and if the setting isn't there, that's a tool problem. But ultimately, if the settings are on the device, it's a fully supported tool at that point.
Outstanding. Good to know that. And that makes things even easier, because then you really don't have to do custom ADMX, right? Well, you might have to do it once just to get the registry settings dialed in, right? And then go from there, just extract those settings and deploy them. Fantastic. That's a great idea. So let's talk about commercial support. So DPC is open source, and so by default, it's supported. There is no support for it. It's supported by the community. So if you're using DPC today, or you're going to evaluate it or test it, Support is community based, so we have a couple of channels for you. You can raise issues on the GitHub. By the way, you can find the GitHub by going to alvpndpc.com. There's a link to the GitHub repository there. So if you have an issue there, you could raise that. The other one is our Discord channel. So we do have a Discord channel. Leo is kind enough to set that up, and he operates that for us as a community. And we all kind of hang out there. And by the way, there's tons of talented people there. I am consistently amazed by the level of expertise there outside of me and Leo. I mean, me and Leo have been doing this a long time. And so naturally, we have quite a bit of knowledge. But I am surprised at how many times when I get to the channel, because I'm not on it 24/7, I'll get to the channel and I'll see some questions and I'll start going down them. I'm like, oh no, that guy answered that, or that person answered that. I'm like, oh, well, cool. I didn't have to do anything. That's great. So feel free to drop in there if you want. I think it's AOVPN discord.aovpndpc.com, right, Leo?
Yeah, I've put that link in the chat as well as the link to the actual GitHub page as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, and there's a link on aovpndpc.com to both of those as well if you want to check that out. So at the end of the day, support is community-based, but we realize that many large organizations have requirements that they might have a policy that states that they're allowed to run open source software, but it has to be commercially supported. And so Leo and I got together a while back and decided that, hey, this is a solution that we can offer to kind of support those customers. So when you purchase a commercial support contract, you do get things like enhanced troubleshooting, prioritized bug fixes, early feature consideration, also a private communication channel. We understand you probably don't want to be uploading log files to a public forum. So you can communicate directly with us. And so if you have an organization which could benefit from that, I'm going to give you some contact information here in just a bit. The cost is based on the size of the deployment. Is that correct, Leo? We kind of do that in banding, right? So
yeah, so it's based on the number of agents you have installed in your environment, and it's relatively broad brush, like the between 2,500, I think it is, and 5,000 is those kinds of levels of banding. So we're not trying to like nickel and dime you out of individual devices or set up some kind of auditing structure like Microsoft or Oracle.
Right.
It's just kind of generally based on kind of the overall value of the product to the organization, and potentially the ultimately the risk from a support side of something happening.
Fantastic. So if you're interested in that, we do have commercial support. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on the final slide about that. So we're going to get to that in a second. But just to kind of wrap things up, Always On VPN DPC, Dynamic Profile Configurator, will greatly simplify your Always On VPN deployment. Trust me, it's going to save you a lot of pain and hassle. It will actually improve connection reliability. It still works with modern management. So if you're moving to Intune, no worries. We got you covered there. We can support it for you if you need. So if your organization does require support, we're here to help. At the end of the day, this is free. If you want to evaluate it, go ahead and download it. Download the software and try it out for yourself. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with it. If you're not using it today, I'm sure you'll love it. And again, so there's no cost unless you need support. But if you don't, you can absolutely use it for free. So it's fantastic. And then in preparation for this talk, I wanted to have a slide where I kind of had some of our customers give me a few words about how they love this solution. There was a gentleman on DPC who said DPC is the only thing between Microsoft and my sanity. If you're on the call, raise your hand. That was a great one. No question. We've deployed this for some very large environments. We've deployed it for several NHS trusts, and they certainly enjoy that in their environment. And then my good friend Al in New York, his comment was, I love DPC the stuff just works. And I think he's the loan administrator for his municipality there, and he doesn't have time to deal with stuff like this. We got DPC up and running for him, and Always On VPN pushed out to his endpoints very, very quickly and optimally, and he was just a huge fan right away. So anyway, that being said, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. I do want to get on to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, pop them into the chat, because that looks like where everybody is at. Or if you feel more comfortable using the Q&A button, we'll happy to answer your questions wherever they are. But does anybody have any questions for us at all? DPC took our headaches away trying to manually deploy XML through SCCM. Yeah, in the old days, I can't tell you how many deployments I did working with SCCM administrators. This was in the days, the very, very early days. Windows 10 was pretty much brand new. And there was no Intune. It was just custom XML, period, right? And so, and most of my customers did not have Intune at that point. Maybe kicking the tires or evaluating it, but at the end of the day, Intune was still very new. Always On VPN was a little bit ahead of Intune, honestly. And so in that scenario, we had to write the scripts and write the PowerShell code to go out and manage that. And I'll be honest with you, PowerShell and XML worked well in the day. The problem with it is it's just not very scalable, especially with SCCM. So SCCM is great. I can push out a script in a config file and blow it down to thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of endpoints pretty rapidly and with high confidence. The real challenge is now, now I want to change some routes. I want to add a new DNS suffix. I want to change protocol strategy, or I want to change. I updated NPS servers in my environment. Now I need to update the EAP configuration settings. Try doing that. The only solution a lot of times was, we just had to redo the whole profile. So then you had to write a new script that looked for the old VPN profile, removed the old one, added the new one, and that was obviously challenging. So, and then how do you deal with it when they're using the VPN tunnel in the first place? You can't swap it on them, so you had to make your script had to handle that. Infinitely easier with DPC, no question.
That was ultimately the exact scenario that led to DPC being created. I just put AOVPN in at a NHS hospital trust, and coming away from direct access, and we deployed the profile through through Config Manager. It was kind of the final day we had it all working, and I was just taking the IT administrators through this is the config, this is the setup, all of this stuff, and the question obviously comes up: how do we update it? And then just taking the guy through the manipulating of the XML file, and then the talking about needing to take it over to config, and the guy's face just dropped and was like, where's the direct access portal? And I'm just sat there going, he's like, I feel bad because he's right.
Of course. You didn't make this thing, right?
Yeah. And it was obviously put in for cost reasons. But that's kind of where the kernel of the idea of DPC came from. And then obviously over COVID, I had a little bit of free time, and built out the core of the service that it is today.
Fantastic. Yeah, glad you guys did that. Let's see. So Andrew McNaughton just got it working a few minutes ago. Did you actually do this on the call? That's awesome. Any change? I'm assuming that means chance, Paul. Any chance for MS Chat v2 support? I would say little to none. We encourage you. We encourage you to do the right thing and use certificate-based authentication. And even there's some history behind even that, because it wasn't until just recently that Leo had decided to kind of ease up on some of the security posture that it took.
I've been beaten down.
Right. Yeah. And ultimately, I get it. Right. It's. But we don't want to. We want to do the right thing. We want to make sure you have the best experience with this, and that means aligning with security best practices as much as possible. So MS Chat v2 certainly not be used for VPN. So probably not going to come. Wesley asks if there's any new features coming.
Yes, the product is not feature complete. I will certainly say that. There's an infinite number of things that I would love to do. The issue is primarily kind of time. Well, there's two things really. One is that it's now in a pretty stable position, so it does most things for most people. And then when you start talking about the super advanced stuff, like, hey, wouldn't it be great if it's like automatically detected profiles and was or tunnels and then started up other ones, or kind of did connection monitoring, all of those kind of things. That's an incredibly complicated feature to write, and then write at the scale and with the with the productionization that our users expect for us. Like, ultimately, what we're doing here is running probably hundreds of thousands at this point of business and potentially life critical services. And I'm always very conscious that one screw up on my side can lead to some really, really bad days for all of the clients. So always try to be incredibly conservative when it comes to not feature development, but in terms of the rollout of additional functionality. So ultimately, that's what, and I will always prioritize bug fixing, especially for commercial support customers, over nice to have features. But that's certainly not to mean that it's feature complete. And please do check out the issues tab on GitHub for kind of the, I say, published list of things that are nice to have things. And if you've got any ideas or feature requests, please do write them up on there so that others can chime in, and we can kind of discuss them there.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, it's funny, Leo, because in the early days when I was deploying it, I had a laundry list. We always used to go back and forth about this. Hey, how about this? How about that? Some of them I remember you'd implemented very quickly. Others were more systemic and involved more change. But man, I have been deploying DPC now probably for a solid last year to two, since it went open source. And I can't say I have had a deployment yet where I've said, ooh, it doesn't do that. We should really put that in. It's rock solid. It does everything that I have needed it to do so far. So, but if somebody has any other ideas, I'm always open to those, because again, like you said, it's kind of feature complete in terms of base functionality, right? But what could we do with it over and above that to further, improve things or make things easier at any number of things? But yeah. Brian Ross, sorry. I missed the meeting. Was it recorded by chance? Yes, we're recording. I'll be posting it on YouTube. So if you follow me on social media, I'll promote that. So you'll have access to that, or you can just visit my YouTube. I think it's just, if you just go to richardhicks.com/YouTube, I forget what my YouTube handle is, but richardhicks.com/YouTube will get you there. XML is a pain in the ass. Yeah, no question. Or sorry, Leo, it's arse in your country, right? Especially
depends on whether you're a northern or southerner.
That's true. Ours is definitely northern in it. XML is a pain in the ass, especially if you have to manage different groups of clients, different routes. Oh, no question. You still, when you're doing a DPC, you still have to have a separate policy, right? It's just a separate group policy, and you still have to manage those. So that's kind of it helps a great deal, but it's still not perfect. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's certainly better than dealing with static configuration files.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what you can do is you can have like your baseline group policy that goes to everyone, and then just impact the. You can't do kind of cumulative mashups. Because ultimately it's either one registry entry that you're modifying there, so you would just need to have a different policy for each of the combined sets of policy that are being applied to the different user groups, and then you can always do your you can scope your group policies to the individual sets of devices, but it is worth again mentioning there that unfortunately it is device based rather than user based.
Yes. Good point. But you make an excellent point. You don't have to make a whole new GPO and go in and add the VPN name and the EAP XML setting or the EAP configurations. You don't have to do all that. It's just basically the deltas, right? So here's my baseline profile. And by the way, this group needs this set of routes. This group needs that set of routes. So it's a different profile or a different GPO with their routes. And then you would target that accordingly. And good point that it is device based, no question. Let's see here. One of the challenges, PJ, one of the challenges I've had with Intune deployments is that when I move a user to a new profile, about 10% of the time, I need to run the cleanup script to remove registry artifact from the old tunnel. Wondering if you've seen this with DPC deployments, and if so, if there's a way to handle it natively. Good question. I've not run into that myself. How about you, Leo?
So when moving you. So I think that this is that cleanup script that you wrote that goes in and cleans up all those different registry settings. So what DPC actually does is it embeds all of the knowledge out of Richard's cleanup script directly into the agents. So before every profile is created, and actually after every profile is cleaned up, it will go through and it effectively runs that cleanup script to keep the CSP registry side of things happy.
Cool. So PJ, so DPC should address that. If it's not, and you still have to run my script, it would be interesting to know what the delta is. What is the difference there? Maybe if you can find that, if you can send that to us, that would be most helpful. That'd be interesting to know. Maybe we are missing something in the DPC code that's not getting cleaned up that could help there. I have not run into that issue myself, but I don't do a lot of day-to-day administration work with Always On VPN. I'm an implementer. I install, configure, hand it over, and I move on to the next one, right? Basically, my whole experience from an administrative perspective is myself in my lab, right? So I still use it, and I obviously travel a lot, and so I'm always connected to my home network and my home lab, and rely on it today. So yeah, but let's see. Today I learned DPC ADMX templates can be used with Intune. Yeah, it's been there for a while. It's not perfect, but it's pretty decent. So
yeah, it's probably worth calling out on the Intune side of things that there is a limitation on the Intune side where if you create or if you import an ADMX, the only way to update that is actually to have nothing connect to that ADMX file, which in the VPN world is you have to kind of get rid of your entire VPN config, which is less than ideal. We are somewhat protected from that in the DPC world because, as we kind of mentioned already, the configure or the settings that are being added to DPC, they're generally cumulative, and the actual needing for new settings to come in, not just bug fixes but actual new settings, that's relatively rare. And also in that circumstance, what you can actually do is you can effectively create your own Delta ADMX file with just the settings that you need or that are being added in, and then you can apply that on top as well.
Better, a decent alternative, right? Beats the rip and replace methods for sure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I know an awful lot of people are deploying DPC with ADMXs nowadays, and I'm yet to really hear of anyone needing, or it's relatively rare to hear about people needing to run an ADMX update on those. Good
deal. Rory, DPC has really been has really taken creating and especially modifying VPN profiles to an epic level. No question. The creating was never terrible. Once you got your XML dialed in, it was cookie cutter, right? You could run the script, point to the XML, boom, and that was great. The problem came later. The problem always came later. And so this is where DPC has just been a godsend. So super easy. Now, if we could just get our FortiGate to behave as nicely, good luck with that one. Fort, FortiGates they can be testy, no question. I really like the FortiGate solution, by the way. I had one in my lab for many years, but yeah, it can be. It never really cooperated with Always On VPN that great. So yeah. Let's see here. Very good. I think it covers everything. Leo, what's the story on Wesley's thing there? Error code return failure was 1931.
So that is relating to FortiGate creation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not that error code doesn't sound familiar to me. Don't think I've encountered that one myself.
Yeah, I mean, my primary experience on the AOVPN front is with implementing Microsoft RAS. So my understanding as to the configurations for third parties like FortiGate as the back end is kind of rather limited.
Yeah, it doesn't. I did it for one customer. We did it in a POC, and it never went to production because ultimately, it I think it complained. It didn't want to use certificate authentication. We ended up having to go to MS Chat v2, which we always want to avoid. It had something to do with the authentication pass through. I forget, but we just couldn't get it to work. It's worked flawlessly for me with Cisco, both routers and firewalls. Done it with Palo Alto and Checkpoint. I've done it with a Sonic Wall, I believe. I've done a few different ones over the years, but the every time there's always a drawback. There's always something that you don't have access to, some feature. A lot of times it's just the protocol SSTP. You can't use SSTP on those things. And so then of course we have challenges and issues dealing with IKV2. By and large, those customers all migrated to RAS. They just put a remote access server behind their firewall in a perimeter or DMZ network, and then everything just works smoothly. When you have a full Microsoft stack, everything tends to behave a little nicer. So very good. Any other questions at all? So I have the slide on here I left some resources for you. Again, the website, aovpndpc.com. You can visit our Discord channel. If you are not, if you haven't joined us there, please do. You have access to just a tremendous amount of resources there. By the way, there's a DPC channel there. There's just a regular AOVPN channel there. And we have some channels there for other things like direct access. So if you're still using direct access, you're happy to jump in there. Global Secure Access, which is part of Microsoft's new Security Service Edge solution. That'll be the eventual successor of Always On VPN, probably in the next 5 to 10 years. But today, it's still pretty new, but we're there talking about it. And digital certificates and PKI are an important supporting technology or feature for direct access and Always On VPN. So we have a channel there if you have questions about certificates, certificate authorities, ADCS, anything like that. We have a channel there if you want to jump in there. So it's basically kind of a generic remote access channel. And so we have a bunch of different things there. So not just DPC. Feel free to join us. If you have questions and you're interested in a commercial support offering or our packages, just drop a note, dpc@darcy.org.uk. That Leo will get back with you for some more information on that. If you would like some hands-on help, consulting services for implementation or migration, I've been doing this for quite some time. I can help you. Visit richardhicks.com. And of course, if you want to connect with me on social media, I have a bunch of links to all my social media on there as well. I think Leo's just on Twitter, so
mainly Blue Sky now, to be honest.
Got it. So anyway, you can find us. And I think we're both on LinkedIn. I think you're on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So LinkedIn is another great place to find us as well. So that brings us to the end of the session. I want to, and also the top of the hour. So this is a good time to cut. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate it. Hope this was helpful and informative. Leo, thanks for joining me and taking some questions and providing some kind of colored commentary on some of the things we're talking about today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
You bet. Thanks everybody, and again, we'll see you on Discord, and we'll probably do another one of these again soon. Maybe do more of an advanced deep dive. So if you're already using it, then we can get more into the nuts and bolts. And so, but we'll promote that on social media and on Discord. So look for it there. But anyway, thank you again, once again, everybody. Appreciate it, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Thank you all.